Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, welcome once again. This is the time when we go around the room and introduce ourselves. My name is Jay Corbett.
Kurt.
Philip.
Howard. Joe Good.
I'm George. Peter.
Adrian Tiller.
Mark. Bill. Richard Azzolini. Jim
Stewart.
I'm Jerry Jones. Don Weepert.
My name is Tage Lodia.
Jim Winters.
Andreas Schmitz.
Roberta.
Clint.
Jack.
I'm Ray Dyer.
I'm Larry Wish.
David Lewis.
So anyone here for the first or second time?
First time.
Welcome. And we will have a social hour after if you'd like us to hang out. Who else? Oh, what was your name again?
Sui.
Sui. Welcome back. So today we will hear from one of our own, Dave Lewis. Has been a member of GBF for 2 years and has been practicing the Dharma for 35 years. First in the Vajrayana tradition and more recently in the Vipassana tradition. He's a member or the participant in the Spirit Rock dedicated practitioners program, and he recently completed his first month-long silent retreat. And he will give us a talk on the Dharma. Please welcome.
It did have a title, but the more I thought about it, the more I got away from the title, so I asked Jay just not to use it. Well, good morning. Our orchestra has been depleted by a beautiful Easter Sunday, but the balcony's full. I'll speak to the back row. I tried to think of some clever tie-in to Easter from a Buddhist perspective and was not very successful. I came up with this very strange thought that when I was thinking about it, that, well, the Christ was resurrected on Easter, and but nobody else was. And the Buddha was not reborn when he died, but everybody else is. And I tried to turn that into a joke, and it just didn't work, and I got way into too much of my head. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Happy Easter. Is it any mystery that there are so many gay Buddhists? This wasn't the topic of my talk, but it came up for me. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I notice when I go out to Spirit Rock or sit at the Zen centers, we're more than 10%. There are a lot of gay Buddhists out there. And I reflected on that a little bit, and one of the things that came to me is that as gay people, we're raised in the straight world, and we have to come up against all kinds of conditioning. Our society, our families, the way we're raised, everything conditioned us to be straight people. But we weren't. That wasn't our true nature. That's not our true nature. So we had to overcome a lot of conditioning as gay people in order to liberate ourselves. In order to have gay liberation, we had to overcome all this conditioning. We still do. It's a never-ending process. We're swimming against the stream. In fact, the Buddha used the same simile when he described Dharma practice. He said it's going against the stream. I think Noah Levine actually named one of his books, Against the Stream. So the Buddha was talking about the same thing in Dharma practice, is that the Buddha didn't teach us ideas or theories or what to believe. The Buddha taught us how to practice. And an awful lot of his teachings about practice was how to swim against the stream, how to overcome this conditioning that we're raised with and that the world teaches us in order to find our own true nature. So just as gay people, we have to overcome the straight world conditioning in order to recognize our true gay nature, and hopefully people have the opportunity to do that. So the Buddha taught that we had to overcome conditioning in order to recognize our Buddha nature. So for me, I think our innate gay nature, that beautiful thing, is just a facet of our Buddha nature. It's just another reflection of our Buddha nature. So this going against the stream is refers to our accumulated habits of conditioning. And we practice in order to overcome those conditioning. Our Buddhist practice overcomes conditioning to see our true nature. Here's how Thich Nhat Hanh talked about it. The lack of understanding, which is delusion, the lack of understanding is the basis for every internal knot. It is difficult for our mind to accept that it has these negative feelings like anger, fear, and regret. So it finds ways to bury these in remote areas of our consciousness. We create elaborate defense mechanisms to deny their existence. But these problematic feelings are always trying to surface. If we practice mindfulness, we can learn the skill of recognizing a knot the moment it is tied in us and finding ways to untie it. Internal formations need our full attention as soon as they form, while they are still loosely tied, so that we can do the work of untying them, and it will be easy. That's Thich Nhat Hanh. So how do we practice with that? The Buddha gave, as you know, dozens, hundreds, thousands of practice instructions. Some of them are really simple and nicely packaged, and some of them are a lot more detailed. But the one I want to talk about today is a little two-part formula of practice, and that's that we practice with encouraging our Brahma Viharas and discouraging our klesas in order to find freedom. So the Brahma Viharas, Donald Rothberg talked about a couple of weeks ago, if you remember when he was here. The Brahma Viharas are the heavenly abodes. It includes metta, which is loving kindness practice, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Those are the Brahma Viharas. So those are things we want to encourage in our mental states and in our lives. On the other hand, the other side of that coin are the klesas. Klesas are, I haven't found a good word for them yet. I guess negative mind states is what I'm most comfortable with. Sometimes they're called defilements, poisons. It's that which keeps us away from awakening. That's what those things that keep us away from happiness and awakening in our lives. But they're mind states, so they can be worked with, and they're conditioned. So we can condition both the Brahma Viharas, the heavenly abodes. We can condition them to bring more into our lives. We do loving kindness practice to have more loving kindness in our lives. And we can decondition the klesas. We can decondition these negative mind states. Have any of you heard the story of the old American shaman and his grandson out on a hunting trip, and the old shaman and the two wolves? There's a story about, it's a short one, there's a story about this shaman, Native American shaman that was out hunting with his grandson, and he was giving his grandson teachings as they were hunting, and he was explaining to his grandson, he said, I have two wolves in me all the time. These two wolves, and one of them is tame and kind and my friend, and the other one is very angry and kind of vicious and causes all kinds of trouble in my life. And these two wolves are always with me, no matter what, and they're always fighting with each other. And he said, this is just a problem in my life. And so they go on hunting on their path, and his grandson's thinking about this, and his grandson finally can't contain himself and says, well, Grandpa, which one wins? If they're always fighting, which one wins? And the grandfather looks at him and says, the one that I feed. So we can feed our Brahma Viharas, heavenly abodes, and we can starve our kilesas. But we have to do that with mindfulness, because they're both with us all the time. We can't just get rid of the untamed wolf. He's always with us. So what are the kilesas? I want to talk about this untamed wolf, since Donald talked about the Brahma Viharas. The kilesas are, you'll recognize these, desire, aversion, and delusion. Just those three things. Supposedly, I haven't really worked this out, supposedly all negative mind states that exist for sentient beings can be fitted into one of these three categories: desire, aversion, and delusion. So it'd be fun if we had time to spend an hour to just say, okay, envy, greed, avarice, any negative mindset you can think of, and put it into one of these categories. But another name for them is the three roots: desire, aversion, and delusion. We all have them. Desire is leaning towards experience. Desire is wanting. Desire is the archetypal yes. It's connection. Aversion, which sometimes is called hate, I think it's too strong a word. Let me say something about translations first. There's a problem with a lot of this Buddhist terminology that comes up, because most of the translations into English that was done of Buddhist texts were done in the 19th century. And they were done by these kind of Victorian guys that gave grandiose English definitions to the Pali words. So desire is often translated as greed, and aversion is often translated as hate. So sometimes you hear of the kilesas referred to as greed, hate, and delusion or confusion. Really strong words. Because desire can be something as gentle as, thinking about lunch. Desire can be wanting to change your leg position because you got uncomfortable. That was desire. And I just reacted to desire. Aversion, on the other hand, is just leaning away from experience. It can be very gentle. It can be, my knee's sore, so I need to move. So aversion is the archetypal no. I do not want. It's a turning away from experience. And delusion is confusion. Delusion is not knowing what your experience is about. Sometimes we just deny experience. Something's going on emotionally. We just, I'm going to stay in denial about that. That's delusion. So the metaphor I came up for this is a refrigerator. What do you do when you got the munchies? You go open up the refrigerator and you take a look. People that have a lot of desire working in their lives will look into a refrigerator and like everything. Everything appeals to them. Like, ooh, I want some of that or some of that. And look at all these great things I have, and I've got 6 different things in my refrigerator that all satisfy my desire, make me happy. Somebody that has a lot of aversion going on for them will look in the refrigerator and not be happy with anything. Like, That's 4 days old. It's probably gone bad. That I ate yesterday. Yogurt I don't feel like. And they'll find something wrong with everything. A delusive type personality, on the other hand, will take a look at the refrigerator and not have any idea what they want. Nothing really appeals to them. And they're not even sure they're really hungry. So, I'm going to talk about desire, aversion, and delusion a little bit. Desire, or greed, is the dominant typology of our culture. Americans are desiring people. Our whole advertising culture, media culture, TV, is about desire. Wrong picture, wrong crowd. Jewelry ad, back page of Vanity Fair. Got a couple of beautiful pieces of gold and diamond jewelry. And these things, I don't know if you can tell, these are human fingerprints in gold dust, apparently. And there's a caption, which I know you can't see because it's in fairly small print, but the caption for this big picture of fingerprints and jewelry is, "All about you forever." Can you think of anything more anti-Buddhist? Forget anicca and anatta. This is all about you forever. If you buy jewelry, you'll live forever, and it's all about you. This is what our culture gives us. And this is what our culture gives us. So, that's some conditioning to overcome. When we respond to suffering, basic life's everyday suffering with desire, we grasp at the comfortable and pleasurable. We're hungry ghosts. You know that expression, hungry ghosts? It's an image in Buddhism. It's just kind of a symbol for desire, where there's these ghosts that have huge big bellies and tiny little mouths, and they can't possibly feed themselves enough to fill their bellies. They're called hungry ghosts. So some associated states that go with desire are vanity, willfulness, pride, self-centeredness, jealousy, avarice, deceit, addiction. And its opposite is aversion. The opposite of desire is aversion. Aversion, again, is any movement away from what's happening right now. We respond to suffering with aversion. When we respond to suffering with aversion, we turn away from unpleasantness. With desire, we turn towards pleasantness. We want more good stuff. With aversion, we turn away from unpleasantness. So a few associated states for aversion are fear, anxiety, boredom, cynicism, hate, anger, dislike. Aversion also tends to isolate us. Desire is kind of about connection. Aversion is about isolation. The us and them duality, gay and straight, us and them, me and you, comes out of aversion. And delusion, or confusion, is a third category. And when we respond to delusion, we deny our experience. Delusion is the most difficult one of the three to work with, because when we're deluded or in denial, we don't even see what's going on. It's not that hard, and I'm sure most of you have experienced this, just sitting with mindfulness. It's not that hard to identify when we have desire going on. Say, oh, there's desire, or I'm really wanting. Likewise with aversion. When you're angry, when you're hateful, when you're just not wanting to deal with something, you can be aware of it. But in delusion, it's really confusing. It's something that's hard to be aware of. It takes extra care. But delusion is maybe the most universal of the three for all of us. For example, the Buddha pointed out that the most common delusion that most of us share is a sense of self. It's almost a universal delusion. And it's a really important delusion to address in our Buddhist experience. So can anybody think of what these three have in common? Any ideas what they have in common? It's kind of a tough one. Okay.
They take us away from the present moment. They take us away from the present moment.
Yeah. That's one of two things I had in mind. They all take us away from the present moment. Yeah,
They
Kurt?
cause suffering.
They cause thank you. They cause suffering. They all are major causes of suffering. And they're all about wanting things to be different. I guess it's another side of what Clint just said. So anytime we find ourselves wanting things to be different, in a small way or in a large way, we're probably dealing with kilesas. We can probably take another step and identify whether it's desire or aversion or delusion. So all of us have these three hindrances going on to some extent, most of the time. But it's useful sometimes, for some people, it's useful to look at them as personality types. Because the Buddha suggests, and especially Western practitioners have gone on to build this theory, that each one of us picks one of these categories, probably in early childhood. Conditioning, we condition ourselves. Each one of us has a tendency towards desire or aversion or delusion, more so than the other two. So we all have all three, and we can't ignore any one of them. But sometimes it's useful to think about which one is the big bear for me. And if you want to explore this more than we have time to today, Jack Kornfield's got a whole chapter about it in his latest book, which is about Western psychology and Buddhist psychology. The Buddhist personality types. So, it's something to explore. It's something to take a minute and think about. I'm not going to ask you to reveal it. If we had a whole day retreat, we'd probably break it into small groups and talk about what our type is. But think about whether you're one of these types, or you lean more in towards, if you tend to be a desiring person, do you tend to lean towards experience? Do you tend to just love pleasurable things and always turn to, think about what's the next nice thing I can do? What am I going to do after this talk? Am I going to go for a walk? Am I going to go for lunch? Am I going to go to the beach? Get some sunshine? Have some good food? Or do you tend to be an aversive? What's this guy talking about in the front of the room? He's really annoying me. I don't like the tone of his voice. It's too cold in here. Why aren't the lights on? Can't wait to get out of here. Or are you a delusive? I'm not sure why I'm here this morning. And I don't know what this guy is talking about, and I don't know what my type is. And it's not making any sense to me at all. Of course, when you have all three going on at the same time, that's what we call a multiple hindrance attack, which non-Buddhists call a bad day. But I've gone through these in retreats a couple of times, and in dedicated practitioners retreat, a week-long retreat, I did about a year ago. We spent a full day on each one of them. And we had about 120 people in that program, and all of them acknowledged that they could figure out which type they were. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. In fact, the Buddha was an aversive. Think about it. First noble truth. Life is suffering. The Buddha recognized that life was suffering, life was about dissatisfaction. He identified the source of that dissatisfaction, the cause of suffering, and he prescribed a formula for overcoming it. That's a classic aversive strategy. On the other hand, Rumi, the poet, gets quoted here quite a bit. Rumi was a desire type. He loved experience, pleasure, friends, food, poetry, God. Rumi talked about. So, being one of these types, if you choose to, recognize yourself as one of these types, doesn't mean there's something lacking in you. It's just another way of exploring. It's another way of looking at how you're conditioned. And once we recognize that conditioning, then we can start working with it. So why do we even want to do this? Why bother looking at our negative aspects of our character? Or negative mind states? Why not just focus on the happy mind states? For one, it allows us to better understand ourselves and to accept ourselves just as we are. I'm an aversive. It was pretty useful for me to figure out that I was an aversive, and I'm a lot more tolerant about my aversive aspects since I kind of realized, well, this is just my conditioning. It allows us to better understand and tolerate others. When you kind of get into this mindset of looking at desire, aversion, and delusion as personality types, kind of like enneagrams or Myers-Briggs, it's just another little box we put ourselves into. Then we start recognizing it in other people we work with, our relationships, our family. I was thrilled when I figured out my mother was a delusive. I mean, it really just answered everything. Well, not everything, but a lot. It allows us, exploring these things, allows us to consciously choose our behaviors and our patterns rather than just being reactive to them, which is what we do in normally everyday life. We just react as, wanting, or we react not wanting or pushing away. It just happens. We can choose how to do that, when to do that, and not to do that if we know what's going on, if we're mindful. And finally, this exploration, this looking at negative mind states, allows us to disidentify with our personalities. In a lot of ways, these mind states kind of define and make up our personality, our positive mind states and our negative mind states. And then we get this big sense of self. This is who I am. Well, as you know, the Buddha discouraged that. And anatta is an important teaching in Buddhism that teaches that we do not have a self. So if we can kind of deconstruct these ways that we've conditioned ourselves and look at the different facets of our personality, that deconstructs the self, and we realize we're just this collection of facets, of characteristics that are conditioned, merely conditioned. We can get rid of them or add to them. We can feed the wolf, not feed the other wolf. So I don't want to just focus on the negative aspects, even of the negative mind states, because each one of them has its positive aspects, and each one of them can be transformed, and each one of them can be our friend. So just to give you a few of the positive aspects for desire types, if you're desire typology. Desire types are fun to be around. They're creative, they're interested, always up for new experiences. Aversives tend to be good at identifying problems. They're comfortable working with difficulties. They're good managers. An aversive can identify a problem, figure out what it's all about, come up with a solution. And they don't turn away from difficulty. Delusives are kind of sweet and harmless. Delusive personality types don't have an agenda, like aversives and desire types do. You kind of want to take care of them. I've always both my partners were delusives, and I'm an aversive, and I figured out, aversives and delusives are a good match, because delusives sometimes just want to be told. You could go a long way with this, who gets along with who and not. So working with kilesas is not really about changing your personality. Your personality is not going to change much. You're kind of stuck with it. So make friends with it. And it's really important when we're looking at, especially when we're looking at the negative mind states that keep us from suffering, it's really important not to be judgmental about it. To treat it with kindness. Because it's here to stay, we can transform it, but if we get judgmental, especially we aversives are judgmental types, if we get judgmental about our judgments, it doesn't go anyplace. We can't change them. Working with kilesas means coming to recognize our conditioning through mindfulness practice and gradually choosing to decondition unskillful habits. It's a practice. It's work. It's something we do on the cushion and something we do off the cushion. I picked up this quote from a retreat someplace, and I'm sorry I can't tell you who said it, but it's really become kind of important to me. Every moment of mindfulness erases a moment of conditioning. So when we're talking about feeding the tame wolf, taming the wild wolf, we do that with mindfulness. We do that by paying attention. And every moment of mindfulness erases a moment of conditioning. So, Jack Kornfield, in his book, you knew I'd get to him eventually, talks about transforming these three temperaments. And again, as I've been trying to stress, he's saying you don't get rid of them. They're part of your personality, but they can be transformed. So we talked about the negative aspects. We talked about the positive aspects. Here's what Jack says about transforming them. The grasping temperament, these are quotes, desire or the grasping temperament, when transformed, gives rise to beauty and abundance. We highlight the goodness and generosity of people around us and make our home and community places of harmony. The aversive temperament, when transformed, gives rise to discriminating wisdom, non-contentiousness, and loving kindness. Anger can be transformed into strength and clarity that unite opposites. Thirdly, the deluded temperament, when transformed, gives rise to spaciousness, equanimity, and understanding, called the wisdom of great questioning. So that's our work. And there's a lot of practices, and I won't go into them in detail today because we don't really have time, but there's a lot of ways that we can work with these characteristics that we share. Just really briefly, loving kindness is really good for aversives. I found in my own practice. In fact, all of the Brahma Viharas compassion, sympathetic joy, loving kindness, good practices for Verses. For people that are kind of caught up in desire, acceptance is an important practice, very supportive. Being able to give up, being able to say no to anything other than where you're at now. With a diluted temperament, it's useful to do careful noting practice. Sometimes it's taught in meditation practice, is being really careful about exactly what's going on in your experience at every moment and labeling it and noting it specifically. So there's practices for each one of these temperaments that help us tame the wolf. Jack has, before I get off the topic of transformation, Jack has a story in here about transformation that caught my attention. When a new Buddha is cast, well, I think this one's very often they're metal and they're cast. When a new Buddha is cast for a temple, it's a ritual experience, and all the participants and community come together for the casting of the Buddha. And in Southeast Asia, have you noticed that sometimes Buddhas have little flames coming out of their heads? It signifies enlightenment. It's a symbol for enlightenment. They have this little gold flame coming out of their head. So that flame in most Buddha statues cast in Southeast Asia is a special part of the statue, and it's cast out of gold and precious metals because it's enlightenment. It's the enlightenment part. So here's what Jack said. Before the casting, participants gather at the temple. There's a special collection of gold for casting the flame of enlightenment that rises from the Buddha's head. Precious jewelry, sacred amulets, even old wedding rings are offered into a crucible and melted to form the flame of wisdom. Symbolically, the base metals of vanity, materialism, superstition, and broken hearts are transformed into the gold of liberation. That's a beautiful experience of transformation. It happens in Buddhist statues and it happens in you and me. So I'd like to end with one final quote. This is from Joseph Goldstein. The Vipassana teacher. Wisdom replaces ignorance in our minds when we realize that happiness does not lie in the accumulation of more and more pleasant feelings. That gratifying craving does not bring us a feeling of wholeness or completeness. It simply leads to more craving and more aversion. When we realize in our own experience that happiness comes not from reaching out, but from letting go, not from seeking pleasurable experience, but from opening in the moment to what is true, this transformation of understanding then frees the energy of compassion within us. Our minds are no longer bound up in pushing away pain or holding on to pleasure. Pushing away pain's aversion, holding on to pleasure's desire. Compassion becomes the natural response of an open heart. With that, I thank you.
We have plenty of time for questions, if anyone has questions for me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm reading that book now, and it's really, it ties a lot together that's been floating on more in my mind. Do you think Buddha's philosophy, I mean, had he been a just specifically the notion of self.
Oh boy, that's a big question. If the Buddha had been a different type, yeah, sure it would have. But he wouldn't have. He wouldn't. He might not have been the Buddha. He might not have been the Buddha.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that when I was looking for types amongst worthy teachers. I don't know. I couldn't come up with a great teacher of all times. I'm sure there are some that come from the delusive type. But I do know several teachers in my own time that freely admit to being delusive. I don't know if anybody of you knows Sylvia Boorstein, and also Richard Shankman, who just wrote a book on samadhi. It's brilliant, cutting-edge book. Both of them I've heard admit to being delusive types. But Rumi was a desire type and very expansive. But Buddha was called, has been referred to as the great doctor, because he diagnosed a problem, got at the root of it, discovered what caused the problem. The problem was suffering. The root of it was the attachment to desire, and then diagnosed a course of treatment. And that's kind of what aversives do. In terms of self, the whole notion of self, well, all three of these kind of blow away if you deconstruct them far enough, blow away the idea of self. Once we realize that we're just a bunch of conditioned facets, and not this solid being of me, then the self kind of dissolves. The idea of self dissolves, but that can come. You can come to that as a delusive and aversive or desire type. Yes.
For me, delusion is to me the kind of capstone of it all, because I find I'm always deluded. Again and again, I find as I meditate that or as I practice, well, not my practice is meditation, but that it's constantly recognizing a false idea, a misapprehension, a behaving in the present moment because I misapprehended why my parents, didn't pay attention to me. I didn't allow them in my child's mind to have their problems, or whatever, and realize it wasn't all about me. It's just a common thing that we do. I guess maybe one of my issues is it's not always about me. These are the delusions that come in. But so the delusions sort of feed the aversion, because I have a false idea, so therefore I'm hiding or not opening to something, or and so on. I find that the delusions, for me, kind of feed all the others. So sitting is constantly trying to discover, or practicing, doing other things. Yoga for me is a big part of my practice. Is trying to discover what's really going on, and what ideas do I have that are wrong. Wrong may not be the right word, but incorrect. Not the way it is, not the way it was, and so on. That's my comment.
Well, it's a very wise perception, because you're absolutely right. Desire, thinking that having more stuff or more pleasurable experience is going to make your life permanently better, is a delusion. And aversion, thinking if you could just push away enough unpleasant things, then life's going to be okay. Delusion. They're all delusion. You're absolutely right. Yes, Howard.
David, thank you. First of all, I just want to acknowledge how beautiful it is to see you in this position and offering dharma to us this day. As a member of our sangha and taking on intentional practice and study, I just feel blessed.
as Dharma today. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I look forward to more opportunities. It just kind of came clear to me there's a number of men in our Sangha who are on very specific, intentional study in the Dharma, and to offer them opportunities to present Dharma to us from their place of learning and teaching. So you're a great model. What came up for me was just, and maybe a really great Easter connection, is the whole idea of transformation that Cornfield introduced to this, that we befriend whatever type we may be, the aversive type or the craving type, or the delusive type, to just befriend that. And in Native American spirituality, there is the notion that we contain the universe in our being, the whole of it, and whatever's casting light. For example, if I'm aversive, just on the other side of that, they always say in Native American spirituality, well, just on the other side of your being is that part to claim, the opposite part of aversion. It's just sitting there waiting. It's there, and it is just as powerful, it's just as potent as the part that's casting light. And it simply needs to be, in a Buddhist sense, awakened. And oftentimes it's precisely through being kind to the part of you that has greater emphasis that it opens up the part that's hidden. And I'm reminded of that by your teaching. Thank you for that. It's an Easter moment for me.
Feed the friendly wolf.
Absolutely.
That's what I love about that story of the two wolves. Is he's not trying to get rid of a wolf. He's just decide he has to feed one and tame the other one. They're both with him.
Well, I think the irony is that warmongers have a profound capacity to make peace. It's lost, it's hidden, it's in the shadow. It's unconditioned, and it's just waiting to be claimed. And that helps me. My anger side has an opposite that's just waiting to be revealed.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I might be piggybacking a little bit on that, but one of the things that I was wondering about, rather than looking at these three things as unchangeable states or characteristics within people, I was wondering to what degree, we can, experience all three of these, like one in response to another. For instance, when do I become aversive as a result of not having maybe had the results that I was hoping from feeding my desires? And I was just wondering about the development that we can go from one thing to the other, rather than, and I'm not sure that that's even what you were saying, rather than having just one of these and being one type from beginning to the end.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind, that we do indeed have all three in us all the time. And I almost didn't do this as a talk, because I always think it's a little bit dangerous to put reality into a box and say this is the way we are, because as soon as you do that, it's not the case. The suggestion is that we kind of have a tendency towards one or the other. But that's not who we are, and that we always have the other ones going on. And I actually made this mistake in my own practice, is once I kind of identified myself as an aversive, I started paying a whole lot of attention to my aversive tendencies. And I identified them, and I recognized them, and I was mindful of them. And I kind of forgot about the delusive and desire tendencies. I just wasn't so aware of them. Well, they're still going on. And I surprised myself one day. This is kind of funny. I surprised myself one day. 'Cause sometimes mindfulness just is automatic. So here I am, really working on my aversive characteristics, and I go to, I don't know, one of those big box stores, to Costco or someplace, to buy a toaster. I needed a toaster. And I'm walking.
You wanted a toaster.
I wanted a toaster. No. I needed a toaster. I went there with a specific mission of spending $15 on a toaster, but I got into the store and I wanted everything else. And I wasn't entirely conscious of it until I found myself whispering, saying out loud, saying, wanting, walking up and down the aisles, wanting. Sales clerk came up and said, something I can help you with? I thought, oh God, it was just desire. I've got all this desire. It was unconscious. When mindfulness kicked in, and that's what was going on for me that day was desire. So yes, we have all three of them, and let's not focus on one to the exclusion of the other two, because they don't go away.
I think they're also all really related, because aversion implies connection, some experience with connection. I would think.
Yeah. So it's a construct. It's a way of thinking about things, but it's not necessarily reality. Clint?
Let's have one more question, and then maybe we can.
Okay. Well, I assume because you.
Go ahead, Clint. Yeah, please.
Okay. Just real quick, I want to say I thought your line in the very beginning. I don't know if funny would be the right word, but I thought it was astute about Christ got resurrected and everybody else didn't, but Buddha didn't get reincarnated, but everybody else did. And just real quick, that was kind of reverberating in my mind while you were talking, and I think, well, does that? How does that define Buddhism versus Christianity? And it seems to me like Christ was an averted person, and embraced aversion too, rather than desire, like the Buddha. But there seems to be some very different things between the Buddhist philosophy and the Christian philosophy, and it seems like the actual Christian philosophy seems to be more about desire than aversion, because Christ himself was more, from my perspective, about aversion. So I don't know, that's a whole. That's a big question.
That's big. That's a big discussion.
No, yeah, I know. And I just was, kind of stream of consciousness there, but probably wasn't very focused or clear. But it brought up some interesting thoughts in my mind about that.
Good.
I wondered if you had 3 words or less.
Yeah, well, hopefully that'll be our Easter reflection.
So, will you hang out for a while to answer?
Yeah, sure.
Questions people have? Okay, so let's thank our speaker. Are there any announcements?
Well, we're doing our annual Point Reyes Chimney Rock Wildflower Hike, April 25th, which is a little less than 2 weeks from now. It's a Saturday. And this is a season where we're going to have wildflowers. They'll be now, and it's just a hike. It's going to take an all-day event because it's way out, quite a distance away. But it's a lovely area. It's a pretty drive and it's a pretty hike. It's going to be a potluck, and I have flyers giving details about it for anybody who might be interested. It's just a way to get out of the city, get out maybe the routine of your life, and to see some pretty nature and hang out with folks. So if you want more information, again, I have flyers outside.
Any other announcements?
Yeah, no, next Saturday, the 18th, is the all-day sitting here for the Gables group. And we have about 22 people registered to come. And there's still time to join. If you have a checkbook today, you could make me a check write the check to the Gay Blues Fellowship for $20 and give it to me. We really just want a head count for food because the lunch is going to be provided. And if you don't have your your checkbook today. There's still time if you want to put it in the mail today or tomorrow. It'll work.
Your flyer outside.
There is a flyer.
And if you want to peak a day of meditation with desire, you can come to the Rainbow Symphony concert Saturday night. Dvorak New World Symphony. And there'll be wine afterwards.
You have a flyer outside.
No, whatever.
You'll have to write out, tell us where it is.
Unitarian Church.
Put it on the
Here,
list,
sir.
sir. Okay. Sounds good.
Any other announcements? Howard?
Yes, our speaker next week will be Eve Decker. She too is coming off quite an extensive retreat and has a number of new pieces of music. She'll also bring another vocalist, instrumentalist with her, so we will be regaled with music and dharma next week.
What's her group's? Rebecca's something?
Say it again.
I'm trying to think of the name of her group. She's in a
Oh,
group.
I don't know.
She's a noted musician.
She's a noted musician. She's been with us before, thanks to Jerry Jones. We're just riding piggyback on his great work, and she's excited to be back here.
Any other announcements? So I am the facilitator / host. So the host announcements. There are chocolate chip scones. Although the turnout is such that I think everyone could have 2 or 3 scones.
Beat the desire.
There's tea, and please watch your cup if you have tea. There's a sign-up sheet for the newcomers if you'd like to receive our newsletter, either in email or on regular mail. And there are people who go to lunch at 12:30 after the social time. So if you want to go to lunch with people, just hang out by the front door. I think that's all. Oh, Donna, yes. How could I forget? I will be harassing everyone with a Donna, and we suggest a contribution of $5 to $8 to cover the cost of renting the space and so forth. And if that's all, did you want to do the dedication, or want me to read the standard one?
I'll do it.
Okay. Hands in a circle.
Do we have enough for circles? Got always do a circle. Well, we dedicate merit, even in our private practice at home, sitting practice, but in groups also, we dedicate merit of our practice, because mindfulness is universal, and awakening is universal. It's not just my awakening, it's everyone's awakening. So whenever we practice, everyone benefits. So that's why we dedicate the merit of our practice. Today we dedicate the merit of our practice to all beings. May all beings, and each of us in this room, come to know our own true nature. May all beings, and each of us in this room, find happiness and mindfulness in our practice. Happy Easter.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.